I welcome you all to the module 8 of this course. So, the module 8 is cognitive and social cognitive perspective on personality. So, this is the second lecture of this module 8 and overall it is lecture number 17. So, today's lecture is titled as Bandura's social cognitive theory or social learning theory. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So, last lecture was lecture number 16 and it is the first lecture of this module. So, in the last lecture we discussed about the George Kelly's theory of cognitive theory of personality. We discussed the various concepts associated with Kelly's theory. We talked about his idea of personal constructs, the mental models and the framework that we use to interpret the world and the people around us, and there are different characteristics associated with the personal construct that human being used. We discussed all the characteristics. We discussed the major postulates that is derived from these characteristics of the constructs and different corollaries associated with these particular fundamental postulates, and at the end we discussed some possible criticism of Kelly's theory. So, today we will be talking about Albert Bandura's social learning theory or social cognitive theory. So, in that particular lecture, in today's lecture we will be talking about some of the major ideas behind this theory. So, we will be talking about reciprocal determinism, we will be talking about personal, proxy and collective agency, we will be talking about observational learning or modeling, and we will be also talking about self-efficacy, the concept of self-efficacy as proposed by Albert Bandura. So, let us start today's lecture. So, Albert Bandura, he proposed his theory, and his theory is named as social learning theory or social cognitive theory. So, his theory kind of integrates the various aspects of learning theories and also the social aspect of our behavior, which was not included in the typical learning theories in behaviorism. It also has an elements of cognitive factors in terms of how people interpret situation and so on. So, it kind of integrates certain dimensions of different aspects. So, in that sense it can explain lot of complex human behavior and can explain human personality. So, one of the major question in personality theory is whether what is the most important determinant of human behavior, whether it is inner forces or outer forces. So, some theories focus more on the inner forces in terms of determining theory, such as psychoanalysis, who talks mostly human behavior is determined by unconscious instincts and motivations. On the other hand, behaviorist school of thought mostly focuses on the outside factors or the environmental factors in terms of determining human behavior. Albert Bandura actually kind of challenged both the ideas. He said both the ideas are not true in a sense, because individuals, according to him, is an active agent responding to both internal and external stimuli. So, somewhere we are forgetting the individual in this whole debate of whether the outside factors are important in terms of determining behavior or the inside factors, but there is an individual who is responding to both the factors. That should also be taken care of, both internal and external stimuli, a dynamic system. He argues that people significantly influence their own motivation, development and behavior through a process he calls reciprocal determinism. So, this whole idea of person, so this whole idea of integrating diverse factor in determination of human behavior, he called it reciprocal determinism. So, what is this reciprocal determinism? So, according to this concept, so there is a constant interaction between the person, environment and the behavior that comes out of the person. So, there is a personal factor inside the person, then the person does some behavior and that behavior is done in an environmental situation. So, there is an environment, there is a behavior and there is a person. These three factors are kind of constantly interact with each other in terms of determining behavior. So, that is called reciprocal determinism. So, here personal, behavior and environmental factors interact and influence each other, shaping individual behavior. So, all these three factors interact with each other in terms of determining behavior. So, it is not completely inside factors or outside factors, there is a constant interaction between these three factors, there is a person also involved in it who is actively interpreting the situation. So, Bandura says human behavior is determined in terms of this reciprocal determinism, where all these factors plays very important role, and it is a product of interaction of all these factors. So, let us see what could be the possible personal factors in determining behavior. So, it includes human cognition, like what kind of thought processes you have. So, there is a cognitive element in person, knowledge, expectations, attitudes, all these determines human behavior. What kind of belief system, what kind of attitudes you have. So, when you talk about personal factors, it includes cognitive factors, it includes affective factors, means emotional and feelings also play a critical role in determining behavior. For example, an employee's high anxiety affects the employee's behavior by causing them to procrastinate the task. So, what kind of emotions we have also influence our behavior. So, if you have high anxiety, you are likely to avoid certain situations. So, it will influence your behavior and the kind of environment that you avoid or you kind of interact with it with. So, within the person there is a cognitive factors, thought processes, belief system, affective, emotional factors, and there could be also biological factors. These are like innate physiological factors that can influence behavior, such as temperament, health status. What are the biological status? What is the health status? What kind of temperament that are influenced by the biological and genetic factors? This also influences human behavior. So, we have already discussed in detailed whole module on biological factors determining personality. So, I will not go in details in this particular module. So, when we talk about personal factors may include cognitive, affective and biological factors which can influence human behavior. When we talk about behavior, which is an action that one performs, it is both a result and cause within the reciprocal determinism. So, sometimes behavior can be the cause of further behavior. So, in this whole reciprocal determinism, behavior can be cause sometimes, and sometimes it is the result of some other factors like cognitive factors or the emotional factors which leads to a behavior, or sometimes behavior leads to some other factors like it can influence behavior, it can influence thought processes, it can influence environment and so on. Behavior can alter environment, create new situation that require further behavioral adjustment. Okay. So, behavior is kind of can be causal factors, can be resultant factors and so on. For example, a person feels anxious about social situation, let us say. So, this anxiety is a personal factor, this is the experience that person is feeling. So, it is an affective factor, and as a result avoids attending social gathering. So, this anxiety, because of this anxiety the person avoids social situation. So, it is influencing the behavior. So, personal factor is influencing the behavior of that person. This avoidance further reinforcement the belief that social situations are overwhelming. So, the more the person avoids, the more he finds it difficult to interact or go to the social situation. So, it influences what kind of situation the person is creating in his life, leading to increased anxiety and social isolation. So, it could lead to social isolation and so on, which could further impact the future behavior of that person. So, like this there can be multiple ways in which behavior can influence, can be a causal factors or resultant factors and so on. When we talk about environmental factors, it may include things like physical environment which can determine human behavior. Physical setting, resources available can influence an individual's behavior. For example, supportive or unsupporting workplace. So, what kind of workplace you are in, whether people are supportive or unsupportive. So, these are kind of what is the nature of physical environment that you are placed in, whether the environment is hygienic or not hygienic. So, all these things can influence your behavior. So, there can be a social environment also. So, interactions with others, social norms, cultural context all shape behavior. Social support, modeling, reinforcement from other people can guide how a person acts in various situations. So, what kind of social situation you are in, what kind of interaction you are having with other people, what are the norms in which you are working and so on. All these things can influence human behavior. So, these are the three important factors. Now, according to reciprocal determinism, these three factors all the time interact with each other. So, how this interaction happens, we will be giving some kind of idea about it. So, there is a bidirectional influence of all these three factors: person, environment and the behavior. Each of these factors influence and is influenced by the other two. So, that is why the arrow, both directional arrows are shown in the diagram. For instance, a person's behavior like practicing a skill can affect their personal factors such as self confidence. So, the more you practice, so that is a behavior, it can influence your personal factor, like it will increase your self confidence, which can then influence the environment. So, you will get more positive feedback and more opportunities in your environment. So, it will also influence your environment. So, this is how each factors can kind of influence each other, and this interaction is a continuous process. This is not a one time interaction, but a continuous and an ongoing process. All the time it interacts, all these things factors interact with each other. Personal factors, behavior, environmental factors constantly interact, leading to ongoing changes and adaptations. So, it is a constant fact constantly happening in our life. So, this is just an example of reciprocal determinism in all considering all the factors. So, let us say a case of a student in a classroom setting. So, it is a typical case, a student in a classroom. So, let us say there are personal factors, some personal characteristics of the student. The student has a, let us say, high level of self efficacy or high level of confidence that that he can succeed. So, let us say this person has a high confidence, high level of self efficacy. So, it is a personal factor. Now, when the student is confident in terms of his or her abilities, then the behavior, the resultant behavior of the student in the classroom will be the student will actively participate in the class, complete assignment diligently and seeks help when needed. When you are confident, when you have self efficacy and you have certain confidence about your abilities, so which is a personal factor, your behavior will change, you will be actively participate in the class, you will try to complete the assignments and whatever is needed to perform better. So, your personal factor influencing behavior. Now, this can further influence your environmental factors, the positive behavior. So, this positive behavior of the student will lead to recognition and support from teachers and peers, creating a supportive learning environment. So, because of his behavior, which is a positive behavior in the classroom setting, it will attract attention of the teacher and the peers, and he will have positive feedback from other people. This supporting environment in turn will further reinforce, further reward the student's belief of his abilities. So, this environment will further influence other factors in terms of, now it is by first it was this one was influencing this and this. Now, this can further influence this and this. So, that is the reciprocal determinism. So, this supportive environment in turn can reward the student's belief in their abilities. The more positive feedback they get, the more confidence they will build in terms of, it will give a validation to their self confidence and encourage continuous engaging, and this will encourage further positive behavior. So, there is a constant interaction, this will interact this and that will further interact other factors. So, that is called reciprocal determinism. So, thus according to Bandura, people do not simply react to environmental events, they actively create their own environment and acts to change them. So, that is an important factors that differentiate Bandura's theory from learning theories like classical conditioning and some extent operant conditioning also. So, that cognitive element, that active interpretation is an important factor in the Bandura's theory. So, cognitive events determine which environmental events will be perceived and how they will be interpreted, organized and acted on. So, positive or negative feedback from behavior in turn influences people thinking and so on. So, that is what we have discussed. So, all can influence the other factors. So, that is the reciprocal determinism, which is one of the fundamental aspect of Bandura's theory. Now, Bandura also talked about personal proxy and collective agency in terms of human behavior. When we talk about personal agency, so that means Bandura believes that individual possesses free will and are not entirely controlled by drives and reinforcement schedules in their learning environment. So, human have certain free will to determine their behavior. Now, if you look at learning theories like classical conditioning or operant conditioning, reinforcement is needed for a certain behavior. So, here Bandura is saying that people can entirely actively from their free will they can act even if there is no reinforcement. So, according to Bandura, cognitive processes enable individuals to select and create or transform situation. Bandura terms this personal agency, the belief that one can affect change to improve circumstances and for themselves and others. So, there is a personal agency that the person believes that he or she can change the environment and circumstances according to what they need. So, that is a personal agency. So, that is an important component of Bandura's theory. So, for example, someone may choose a particular career path, pursue hobbies that bring them joy, work to improve their workplace environment. So, a lot of things we do out of our free will to change our environment. So, that is called personal agency. Proxy agency basically means, according to Bandura, personal agency can expand to proxy agency, where individuals seek help from others to change certain aspect of their lives. Now, many times we cannot do everything on our own. So, we take help from other people to change our lives or to make certain impact in our life. So, that is why, because we are social animal, we take support from other people. So, that is called proxy agency, when we seek help from other people to make certain changes in one's life. So, this is necessary when individual is individually not able to do. For example, they may lack means, knowledge or power to achieve certain goals independently. So, proxy agency obviously is beneficial when one is not able to carry out certain activities. Bandura wants certain potential downside of over reliance on others can lead to loss of personal control. But when you become over dependent on other, obviously that has a negative impact. Then you will be dependent all the time on other people to carry out certain activities, and it will impact your sense of autonomy and freedom. So, it is necessary. Sometimes people also use proxy agency, but over dependence can have negative impact on one's sense of autonomy and freedom. So, here one example is given. So, for example, a parent might ask a family member, some other member, to take care of the child to pursue a job, because they are going to job. So, they cannot take care of the child all the time. So, they may seek someone else help from the family. So, that is a proxy agency. But if from whom they are taking support, some family members, if their intention or actions are not aligned with the parent's value, then it leads to complications. Let us say the kind of support they wanted or the kind of care they wanted for their child, probably that person is not able to provide. So, it will not help their whatever the purpose for which they sought support from that person. So, like this, all this complication can happen in case of proxy agency. The last one is collective agency, which basically means collectively as a group, many times we try to do something as a group action, not individual action. So, that is called collective agency, where a group of people collaborate, believing that they can collectively improve their circumstances. So, collective agency is powerful in creating social change and addressing community and organizational issues. So, bigger changes in our life or in our society, in our community needs collective agency. Individual alone cannot do so, we need support from lot of people. For example, the rise of farmer markets, where farmers band together to sell their product directly to the consumer at fair prices, without basically bypassing the third parties or government agencies. Collectively they decide to do something and they take certain action for their own well-being to get fair prices. So, that could be an example of a collective agency. Now, one of the central idea in Bandura's theory is observational learning, or which is also called as modeling. So, according to Bandura, he proposed that significant portion of our learning, whatever we learn in our life, it happens through observations of other people or by imitating the behavior of other people. So, we look at other people and then we learn how certain things are done from our childhood, and many times we imitate the behavior of other people. So, that is how we learn significant portions of learning that occurs in our life, especially in the human life. Observation learning plays very important role. So, according to Bandura, more of our learning occurs by observational learning as compared to classical and operant conditioning. So, Bandura says we also learn by classical conditioning sometimes by operant conditioning, that we discussed in earlier module. But he said in the human life, majority of the learning that happens, major portion is actually by observational learning and not by classical and operant conditioning. Now, in this context, some experiments were conducted. In one of the famous studies conducted with Walters and Bandura in 1963, what they did, they were doing an experiment on observational learning. So, what they did, the children, they took children and they divided them into two groups. So, one is called experimental group, one is called as a control group. So, in the experimental group, So, there are these two groups of children. Experimental group, what was the task of the children? The children observed an adult displaying aggressive behavior towards a plastic doll named Bobo doll, hitting and kicking it while shouting commands like throw him in the air. So, basically what they observed the behavior. So, children in this condition, they observed behavior of an adult playing with a plastic doll. The name of that doll is Bobo doll. Now, what they observed, that this person is hitting, kicking, aggressively behaving with that doll. So, children just observe it. Okay? So, this is the one condition of one group of children, this is what they have observed. In the control group, children did not witness such a, so in control group they were not shown such kind of aggressive behavior. So, they were shown something neutral behavior or something like that. So, this is the difference in these two group of children, the task that they were given. Now, later this both group of children were allowed to play with the same doll. So, this is what. So, initially they observed an adult playing with that doll. In the experimental condition, they observed that the adult is aggressively behaving with the doll, very aggressively kicking, shouting and all kinds of things. And in the control group, they just observed a neutral behavior. Now, later these two groups of children were allowed to play, they were given to play with that doll. Now, what was the result? The result showed that children in the experimental group, where they observed the aggressive behavior of an adult with the doll, they actually displayed twice as much aggressive behavior towards the doll as those of control group. So, the group that observed that aggressive behavior, when they were allowed to play with the same doll, they displayed twice aggression as compared to the group of children who did not observe such aggressive behavior. So, that means they learned by observing that particular model who was aggressively behaving. So, they just imitated that behavior. So, they displayed twice as much aggression towards the doll as compared to the control group. So, this study demonstrated the power of observational learning, where children imitate the aggressive behavior they had observed in the adult model. So, they just learn by observing another person. So, this is an experiment that shows how we learn by observation. So, this is some of the images of that experiment, where how children were playing and displaying aggression when they were allowed to play. So, this was an adult model they observed, and here when they were allowed to play, how they were behaving in this in this particular experiment. Now, when we talk about observational learning, there are many things also we need to consider. No, we do not just learn everything that we observe. So, there has to be many important factors that we need to take care. So, some of the important factors what Bandura found in term when we model somebody's behavior or when we learn by observation. So, in this modeling process, at first glance appeared simple, it seems very simple thing. There is an observer, there is a model, but the question is whether the observer will imitate this model action. Do we imitate or learn everything that we observe all the time? So, the answer is not very straightforward. It depends on many factors. Okay? So, Bandura concluded that various versions of the study, 3 factors are important in modeling or observational learning. So, whether we learn an behavior by observing depends on 3 factors. So, all these factors actually came from many versions of this study that we talked about. So, they did multiple ways of studying in terms of observational learning, and they tried to find what factors facilitate the process and hinders the process. So, out of these factors, first one is characteristics of the model also determines whether we learn by observing or not. What is the characteristics of the model that we are observing? So, if the model is, there is a similarity with the observer. If I am observing someone else's behavior, if that person is very similar to me, then I am more likely to imitate his or her action. The more I perceive similarity with another person, then the more one is likely to imitate their behavior. So, this is one thing, similarity to the observer. More similar the model is to the observer, the more likely imitation occurs. Second is complexity of the behavior. Simple behaviors are more likely to be imitated than complex one. When behavior is simpler, then people are more likely to imitate it as compared to complex, because learning a complex action is not easy. So, simple behaviors are imitated much more frequently as compared to complex behaviors. Then the type of behavior, hostile and aggressive behaviors are more likely to be modeled. People are more likely to model or imitate behavior which are negative, like hostile and aggressive behavior as compared to, let us say, positive behavior. So, it has a lot of implication about the media and the and the things that are shown in the TVs and medias and all the social medias and so on. It can have a huge influence on us in terms of what we learn. So, we will be talking about that later. So, typically we are more likely to model or imitate behavior which are hostile and aggressive. So, these are about characteristics of the model. Second is attributes of the observer, means characteristics of the observer, who is observing, what is his characteristics. One is then what his confidence level will determine. Individuals with lower confidence are more prone to imitation. It has found that people who are less confident, they are more likely to imitate other behavior, because they are not confident in doing things themselves. So, they are more likely to imitate someone else's behavior and do it. So, confidence level could be one of the important factors. Second is self-esteem. Those with low self-esteem are more likely to imitate, which is connected to self-confidence also. So, if you have low sense of self-worth, you are more likely to imitate other people. Competence, feelings of incompetence in situation increases the likelihood of imitation. If you are more competent in doing something, you will be doing your own thing, but the less, if you are not competent in doing certain behaviors, you will likely to imitate from someone else, because you do not know yourself. Learning history, individuals rewarded for conforming behaviors are more inclined to imitate. So, if in the past you are, after imitating certain behaviors, you are rewarded, then you are more likely to do similar behavior in the future by imitating the same behavior, because you are rewarded earlier. And then dependency, highly dependent individuals are more prone to modeling. The people who are very dependent, they do not have much of their own thought processes, they are more likely to imitate other people behavior or modeling. So, what are the characteristics of the person who is observing also determine whether observational learning will happen or not. The third factor is the consequences of the behavior. Now, when we observe someone else's behavior, so there is a consequence to that behavior. What happens when that person does certain actions? What is the result of that action? That will also determine whether someone will imitate or not. So, consequence of behavior could be either positive or negative. Okay? If individuals believe that imitating a behavior will lead to positive outcome, they are more likely to do so. So, according to Bandura, this is a very influential factor. If a person believes that if I imitate or model a certain behavior and I will get positive result out of it, then they are more likely to model that behavior. So, in the study of Bobo-Doll, they did many versions of that study. In another version, in this Bobo-Doll study, some of the children watched as the model who hit the doll was given praise and candy. So, in another version of the experiment, where when the children observed that the adult person who was hitting and doing engaged in aggressive behavior with the doll, they were rewarded after that by giving candy or giving praise. And another group of children saw the model receiving verbal abuse and punishment. So, one group observed that after the behavior is punished, and another group observed that behavior is rewarded. When they themselves were then again given the chance to play with the doll, the children who observed the punishment displayed significantly less aggression, because they have seen aggression behavior is punished. So, they are less likely to engage in the behavior as compared to when children observed that their aggression was reinforced or rewarded. So, what is the consequence of the behavior is also kind of person thinks about that, and accordingly they whether decide to model or not to model. Bandura demonstrated that while reinforcement or reward is essential in learning, lot of learning like classical conditioning, operant conditioning, but in social learning many times consequence is not necessary condition. Sometimes without reward people learn also, but in operant conditioning or classical conditioning consequence is important. Without that, the behavior will not happen. But in case of observational learning or modeling, many times we can learn a lot of this behavior just observing and without getting any reward also, or without any reinforcement. Sometimes things like attention grabbing stimuli like vivid billboards, advertisement and loud noises can influence our learning process, even though we do not get any reward directly, but something very dramatic and attention grabbing, the moment we observe them, we learn about them, because it kind of registers in our mind. So, although we may not consciously process this information at that time, we can recall it later, such as recognizing a product from a billboard when at the supermarket and so on. So, many times obvious or kind of immediate reward may not be essential in observational learning also. And Bandura also says individual can sometimes reward themselves. So, that is called self reward or self reinforcement by evaluating our action, stopping certain behavior to provide no pleasure or to judge something harmful and so on. So, many times we also reward ourselves based on certain behavioral consequence and so on. So, what is the process of this observational learning? How do we learn something by observation? Okay. So, mechanism Bandura proposed the detailed factors that are responsible for observational learning. So, he analyzed observational learning and says observational learning depends on 4 mechanisms, 4 related mechanisms. One is observation depends on attentional processes, then retentional processes, production processes, and last one is incentive or motivational processes. So, let us see what are these factors. So, attentional process means what? To learn something we need to give attention. To learn anything in life, attention is important. Without attention you will not be able to register anything. So, to register something in our mind or in our memory, we have to pay attention. So, attention is more fundamental for any kind of learning. So, attention is the initial stage where observer focuses on the model. So, if you want to learn, I am learning something from someone else. So, you have to pay attention to that behavior, then only you will be able to register something. So, for effective learning, that is very important. So, Bandura identified various factors that influence attentional processes. So, attention is influenced by so many things, so many factors in the environment which can influence our attention. One is what is the characteristics of the model, whether the model kind of catches our attention or not. Observer may more likely to pay attention if the model who are similar to them in terms of age, status, sex and appearance. So, similarity attracts more attention. If you see somebody is very similar to you, or if you think somebody is very technically advanced and somebody is very different, then you may think no, that person is very different and has some special knowledge. So, probably you will not pay much attention because you think I will not be able to perform those actions. But if you think person who is similar to you, then probably you will pay more attention in terms of learning. Celebrity models, experts and those perceived as confident or attractive often command greater attention. So, if a model is more attractive, people like celebrities are used in the advertisement. One of the reason is that you pay more attention to them. People who are expert, who are perceived as more confident and attractive are more likely to attract attention. In attention, cognitive and perceptual skills also plays very important. So, observers with highly developed cognitive and perceptual skills. So, the more developed thought processes and perceptual skill one has and a good understanding of the behavior being modeled are more likely to pay closer attention. The more you understand, more you are likely to pay attention. If you do not understand something, generally you will get bored out of it and you will not pay attention. So, that cognitive abilities and perceptual skills are very important. Relevance of the behavior that you are observing also attracts your attention. Observer tend to pay greater attention to model behavior that are perceived as relevant to their life. If you think certain behavior is relevant to your life, you are more likely to pay attention. If you think this is not important and it is not relevant to my life, probably you will not pay much attention. When the model behavior is personally relevant or has implications for the observer, they are more likely to focus and pay attention to it. So, observer pay close attention to behaviors they expect to perform themselves. So, when they think that I need to perform it in my life also, because it is important for my life also, probably they will pay more attention. So, the first process is attentional process. So, to learn something, any behavior through modeling or observation, we have to pay attention first. and we discussed what are the factors that can influence attention. Second important thing in terms of social learning or observational learning is retention. So, once you pay attention, the next thing is that you have to remember it. Retention involves remembering a significant aspect of the model behavior to repeat it. So, if you pay attention and forget about it, then you will not be able to perform the behavior because you forgot. So, we see lot of things around us, but we do not learn everything because we forget lot of things. So, to learn something after paying attention, we have to remember it also. So, that is called retentional process. So, to retain observed behavior, the information must be encoded and represented symbolically. So, it has to be encoded in your brain and in the memory. So, this can be achieved through two primary system, imaginal internal representation system and the barbell system. So, this is basically talking about how you encode it in the memory process. One way is that you can encode it in the imaginal system representation. In this system, basically what happens? Imaginal internal representation. So, you represent it as an image form or put it or memorize it as an image form what you have observed with certain images whatever you have seen. So, in this system individuals form vivid and easily retrievable mental images while observing the model. So, basically you simply remember the image of how the person have done something. Okay. So, image is kind of encoded in the memory. So, this mental imagery serves as basis for imitation later. So, whenever later you want to perform that, so you remember that image how that person has done it. So, that is called imaginal internal representation system. Or many times you also learn things by barbell encoding, barbell representation system. This involves encoding observed behavior through barbell description. So, lot of things that we remember is that you talk to yourself and say I will do this first and then I will do this, then I will do that. So, in the barbell form, one is in the mental images, another is barbell form. This is how it is represented or encoded in the memory. So, individual describe to themselves what the model is doing, how it is doing. So, and that description is encoded in the memory, and when they later want to perform it, they try to remember those description that they try to remember those. So, the third process, so first is attention, then retention, then third is production process. Production basically means practice, you have to practice. You cannot just learn anything simply by remembering something. Many times we remember a lot of things, but we are not able to perform until unless we practice it properly. So, production process basically includes practicing. So, despite attending or giving attention or retaining or remembering something without rehearsing, individuals may still struggle to perform the behavior correctly, particularly skilled action, if that is not rehearsed properly or that is not practiced properly. You may remember, but in order to produce that behavior, if it is a skilled action, you need to practice it again and again. So, practice or production process is necessary to translate symbolic representation into actual behavior, because you may remember it as a symbolic form, but to produce it in your action, you need to practice it. This involves physical performance of the action repeatedly to achieve proficiency. So, that is something also very important. For example, consider the process of learning how to drive a car. So, you cannot learn driving a car just by observing someone else. You can see what kind of action the person is doing, you can remember also how they have done and everything, but still you will not be able to drive a car until unless you practice actually driving the car. So, that is where the production process is important. So, practicing of the proper physical movement along with feedback on their accuracy is essential to produce smooth and skilled performance. Until unless you perform properly, you will not be able to become confident in producing that action. The fourth process is incentive or motivational process. So, no matter how well individuals attend to retain the observed behavior, or even they may have ability to perform them, they will not, many times people will not produce or kind of get involved into the action until unless they have certain motivation to do it or certain reward for doing it. So, that is called as the last process called intentional or motivational process. So, incentives are available, observational is more quickly translated into action. When you see there is an incentive for doing an action, immediately you are more likely to do it. Many times you may know the action properly, you remember it, you have paid attention, you have all the abilities to do it, but still you will not do it because you think what is the point of doing it, I may not get any reward out of it. So, that is plays very important, that what do you have motivation to do it, do you have incentive to do it. So, that incentive also influences attentional and retentional process. Individuals may not pay much attention without an incentive to do so, resulting in less retention and observational behavior. This motivational process can influence all the other factors also. If you are motivation is less, you may pay less attention. If your motivation is less, you may not remember it also properly, and so on. So, like that. So, that is also very important factor in terms of whether we learn an action or not. So, anticipation of reinforcement is very important in the incentive in this factor that we are talking about. Our incentive is to learn by anticipation of a reinforcement or a punishment. Seeing that a model's behavior produces a reward and avoids punishment can strongly incentivize the action in order to pay attention, remember and correctly produce it. So, if you think that after doing this behavior I will get reward, you are more likely to do that behavior, as compared to when you think after doing this I will be punished, then you are less likely to do it. However, in social learning, reward is not always necessary. Reward and punishment may not be always necessary to learn something. It may facilitate the learning, but it is not always an essential requirement in order to learn something by observing. Many factors other than reward of behavior determines what individuals attend to, retain and rehearse. For example, loud sound, bright lights and exciting videos may capture interest even without immediate reinforcement. Something that is very loud, very intense and some visually or auditorily automatically catches our attention, even though we may not get any reward after listening to that or watching that. Without any immediate reward, sometimes we can also learn a lot of things simply because of the exclusive characteristics of the things that we are observing. Bandura's research demonstrated that children imitate a model's behavior observed on television or video game regardless of whether they have been promised a reward or not. Many times Bandura found through experiment that children imitate or learn a lot of models behavior from the televisions or video games, even though they may not get any reward because of that. They simply learn by observing. So, reinforcement can assist and facilitate, but it is not an absolute necessary thing for social learning to happen or observational learning to happen. Now, another most important concept of Bandura's theory is self-efficacy, which is which came out of this observational learning, which can be connected to that also. Self-efficacy basically refers to an individual's belief in their capacity to produce behavior necessary for a specific performance. What is your or one's belief about their capacity to do certain actions? Do they believe that they can perform an action, or do they believe that they will not be able to perform an action? So, that belief plays very important role in lot of outcomes in our life. What is your belief about your capacity to produce certain actions? That is called as a self-efficacy. That is your level of self-efficacy. Higher self-efficacy means you have a belief that you can do certain actions. If your self-efficacy is low, means you believe that you will not be able to perform that action. Albert Bandura has placed cognitive mechanism of self-efficacy to central role in the theory of personality, functioning and change. So, he says mental factors plays very important role in the concept of self-efficacy. While modeling remains a significant of his framework, it is primarily viewed as method to cultivate necessary level of self-efficacy. So, modeling and observational learning, through that basically what Bandura was indicating is about what influence human behavior is concept of self-efficacy. To effectively perform an action, we need self-efficacy. Now, according to Bandura, individuals who perform effectively possesses high and realistic self-efficacy expectation that direct their actions. So, obviously, the performance should be backed by realistic self-efficacy. You cannot, you do not know anything to perform, and if you think I can do everything, that is not real self-efficacy, because that will not be backed by your actions, because you will not be able to perform, then self-efficacy will go down. So, backed by realistic self-efficacy is very important. Conversely, those who struggle to perform, if you are not able to perform or facing failure again and again, obviously your self-efficacy will go down and it will impact your performance negatively. The concept of self-efficacy is central to Bandura's social cognitive theory, and it influences our thinking, our feeling, our motivation, etc. Now, it is not just about having skills. One may think if I have skills, I will be able to perform. Many times people may have skills to do something, but their self-efficacy is low. Their confidence in performing that action is low, even though they may have high skills, but because of low self-efficacy, they are not able to perform to the best of their abilities. So, that is what happens when self-efficacy can be influenced by many other things, not just skills. So, if you have high skill, does not mean automatically it will get converted into high self-efficacy. It may, but not necessary. So, having skill is different than having high self-efficacy. So, Bandura emphasized that knowing what to do and having the required skill does not guarantee effective performance if individuals have significant self-doubt in their abilities. So, there are many people who are very good, very skilled, but because of self-doubt, low self-efficacy, they are not able to perform to the best of their abilities. Consequently, people with the same skills or same person at different times may perform very differently. The same person, when he has high self-efficacy, will perform very differently than when the same person in another situation with low self-efficacy, even though skill is same. So, with the same skill, two person may perform differently because of their level of self-efficacy. So, the competent functioning requires both skills and sense of self-efficacy to utilize those skills effectively. So, to perform effectively requires both the things, both skills are required as well as self-efficacy is required. So, that is where mental factors plays very important role. Additionally, even if people have the necessary skills and a strong sense of efficacy, they may not perform the activities without sufficient incentive. So, incentive always plays important role. Many times people may have high skill, high self-efficacy, but they will not simply ignore something and they will not get into this action simply because they think I do not have anything to get out of it. So, if reward is there, then they will perform. So, the incentive anyway will play important role. So, according to Bandura, efficacy expectations shape individual choices of activities and environment settings. So, efficacy is very important in terms of it determines your behavior, what kind of things you choose in your life, what kind of actions you do, what kind of environmental setting you prefer, and all kinds of things will be determined by your self-efficacy. So, this self-efficacy judgment also dictates the amount of effort people will invest, how much effort you will put. If you have high self-efficacy, you are more likely to put high effort as compared to when you have low self-efficacy, you will like to run away and so on. So, these are some of the characteristics according to Bandura. People with low self-efficacy expectation generally they avoid situations as they perceive as threatening and beyond their coping skill. Any situation where some challenging situation or some threatening situation, they will immediately run away if they have low self-efficacy. When they must engage in such situation, their low self-efficacy leads to minimal effort and quick resignation. So, their effort will be less, they will put less effort. That is also another thing, people with low self-efficacy. For example, a shy individuals may avoid social setting. If they attend social functions, they exert little effort to interact, often remaining isolated. So, let us say somebody is very shy and they avoid social situations, because they have low self-efficacy in social situations. Even if they attend, they make little effort to make connection with people. What happens? So, they kind of isolate themselves. The more they isolate, the more likely they will feel low confidence in interacting with people. So, this is how this whole cycle goes on. Because of shyness, they avoid, and the more they avoid, the more isolated they become. The more they isolated, they kind of they feel less confident in terms of approaching people and so on, like that. So, low self-efficacy can lead to a lot of this behavioral circles and so on. On the other hand, people with high self-efficacy will choose more challenging tasks and seek opportunities and development of skills and so on. They will exert more effort wherever is required, persist in the face of difficulties, engage in minimum self-criticism, and which increases their chance of success in life. So, self-efficacy can lead to so many outcomes in our life. Now, from where this self-efficacy comes? What is the source of this self-efficacy? Why some people have low self-efficacy? Why some people have high self-efficacy? What is the source of this self-efficacy? So, according to Bandura, there are 4 sources from where self-efficacy emerges. One is your accomplishment in life. To what extent do you accomplish things in life? Vicarious experience means experience by looking at other people. Others' experiences also teaches you something. Verbal persuasion, when people tell you to do something, verbally say you can do something, that also influences your self-efficacy. Or when somebody says you are worthless, you cannot do, that can also influence your self-efficacy. States of physiological arousal, emotional arousal. When you perform something, what is your physiological arousal level? Do you feel a lot of anxiety when doing something? So, that is an indicator of low self-efficacy and so on. So, physiology can also indicate, or that can not necessarily indicate, but you take this cue from the body if you feel anxious that I am not able to perform better and so on. So, we will talk about that. So, let us see each of these sources, how that influences self-efficacy. So, one is performance or accomplishment or mastery experiences in life. What is your past history in terms of accomplishment? Mastery experiences are most influential source of self-efficacy. They involve personal experiences of success and failure. So, what are your experiences of success and failure in your life in the past? That will determine in future what is your expectations, what is your self-efficacy level. Successful experiences boost self-efficacy by reinforcing the belief that one can achieve desired outcome, because you have already achieved and succeeded. So, you feel in future also I can do it. Conversely, repeated failure, especially early on, can undermine self-efficacy. But if somebody experiences repeated failure again and again, his or her self-efficacy obviously will be much lower. For example, a student who successfully solves complex mathematical problem builds confidence in their math skills. So, they think that they are very good in maths, because they can solve complex problems, while if they repeatedly fail in this task, might lead to believe that they are bad in maths. So, what is your experiences in the past, that will determine what is your self-efficacy level in a particular task. So, once strong self-efficacy expectations are created, occasional failure may not impact much, but obviously repeated failures can have an impact. So, once you have a strong self-efficacy in certain domains of life, few failures here and there may not influence much in their judgment of efficacy. So, conversely, the opposite is also true. When you have a very low self-efficacy because of low repeated expectation, 1 and 2 successes may not suddenly increase your self-efficacy. However, low expectation can be changed obviously by repeated and frequent successes fueled by determined effort on part. So, individual can obviously change their self-efficacy, but past history can play a very important role. What is your experiences in that domain of life in the past? Second important factors which from where we generate our self-efficacy is, that is typically related to vicarious experience, means observing other people. Seeing and visualizing other performing successfully can affect our efficacy. If you see people who are similar to us also able to perform something, it gives us more confidence that I will be also able to perform. So, looking at other people doing the similar actions can instill sense of self-efficacy. So, observing others succeed and enhance observational belief in their own abilities of mastery similar task. Conversely, watching people of similar competence fail despite high effort can decrease also self-efficacy. If you see a person similar to you putting lot of efforts and again failing, that can also lead to negative experience in terms of your lowering self-efficacy and so on. So, looking at others also can influence your self-efficacy. The third source is verbal persuasion. Verbal persuasion is frequently employed to convince people that they possess certain necessary capabilities to achieve the goals. So, many times parents verbally pursue their kids, you can do it, you have the ability to perform something. So, that is verbally you are trying to influence their self-efficacy. On the other hand, if you tell somebody again and again you are worthless, you cannot do it, that person will register that and it will decrease their self-efficacy. So, this verbal persuasion plays very important role. So, many parents encourage their children to believe in their potential to succeed in various aspects of life. Such encouragement can exert, if sufficiently given with direction and guidance, can increase their self-efficacy. However, this verbal persuasion and encouragement must be realistic. You cannot say anybody you can do anything, no, that is not possible. So, that has to be realistic persuasion, If that children with little effort he or she can do something, obviously then it will work. If you ask that children to do something which is beyond their capacity, then they will fail and your persuasion will not work and they will not believe in your verbal whatever you are saying. So, if individual fails to achieve their goal despite persuasion, it can result in low self-efficacy. So, that is why the realistic persuasion is something very important. The fourth factor is emotional arousal. When you perform something, what is your emotional experiences? Stressful and difficult situation often cause high arousal in most of individuals, who then use this arousal to judge their capacity. When you perform something, your body also gives certain physiological indicators like arousal. No, you feel highly anxious or stressed, then people may think that this is an indicator that I am not doing good. They take physiological cue as their level of confidence or performance. So, high arousal typically impairs function. So, physiologically high arousal may obviously impact one performance also, leading expectation to failure, and people mentally automatically make conclusion that I am not doing good, which may not be necessarily all the time. So, this typically impairs performance, leading individuals to expect failure and experience low self-efficacy expectations when they feel tense and physiologically aroused. And oppositely, when you feel relaxed when you are doing some actions, you feel more confident in doing that. So, physiological arousal can play a very important role in your sense of self-efficacy. So, there are many questionnaires which were developed to measure self-efficacy of individuals. Some questionnaires initially were developed which are called generalized self-efficacy, which included questionnaires like general self-efficacy measure, general self-efficacy scale by these people, general perceived self-efficacy scale, and so on. Certain questionnaires are there to measure self-efficacy. Despite their utility, Bandura criticizes some of these global scales which measures general self-efficacy. He argues that few people have confidence in every aspect of their life. So, he said it is not very important or fruitful to measure self-efficacy, general self-efficacy, because people are not expert or have high confidence in every aspect of their life. They may be good in something, they may have high self-efficacy in certain domains of life. So, measuring self-efficacy as a general thing may not be a fruitful exercise. So, he kind of argued that we should measure self-efficacy more domain wise. So, in that context, later certain questionnaires were also developed. For example, children's self-efficacy scale were developed to measure self-efficacy for academic achievement, self-efficacy for self-regulated learning, social self-efficacy. So, people may have self-efficacy in certain domains of life. Academic self-efficacy, one may have very high, may not necessarily they have high self-efficacy in other aspect like social self-efficacy may not be high. So, like that, so it is more fruitful to measure self-efficacy in the domain wise. So, questionnaires are there for general also, for domain wise also, but Bandura says domain wise measurement is much more fruitful. Now, at the end, let us talk about the implication of this whole model or whole theory of observational learning, or we learn lot of things by observation, because in today's world particularly, we see lot of negative things in the media, televisions, and also in the video games and so on. So, aggression and violence is prevalent everywhere. So, what will be the implication of this in terms of behaviors of people, how it will impact from this perspective. So, violence and aggression acts are prevalent in society with everywhere, especially in the media and televisions and so on. It plays very important role in everybody's life. So, by the time an average child graduates from elementary school, this is an much earlier data, 1998 data, this now probably the number will be much higher in today's world. By the time an average child graduates from the elementary school, they will have witnessed over 8,000 murders and approximately 1 lakh other acts of violence on television. Now, this is 1998 data. I am sure this number is much higher in today's scenario. So, we see lot of aggressions and negativity in the media and the televisions and the movies and the video games and so on. This exposure extends to news programs, music videos, law and order shows, films, video games, everywhere. Violence and aggressions are shown. Critics many times may argue that media violence has not much impact. However, Bandura from his perspective and from his research shows that such portrayal of violence can have serious and harmful effects. While media violence is not sufficient or necessary cause of aggression, not necessarily it will immediately cause an aggression or aggressive behavior. It can facilitate aggressive behavior in individuals, particularly those who are low in impulse control or high in hypermasculinity. This can facilitate, this may not immediately cause aggression for everybody, but people who are more prone for aggression, who has less self control, or people with hyper masculinity, those kind of people are more they will be much more influenced by those portrayals, and they are more likely to act in those aggressions. Another common argument is that only disturbed individuals are affected by media violence. Bandura counters this, citing research which shows under certain circumstances, even so-called normal individuals also can be induced to act aggressively, and people act aggressively even in normal individuals also, if sufficient stimulus is there in the environment. So, some of the research evidence in this direction, I will just discuss some of them. So, Bandura's research highlighted the profound impact of media violence on behavior, demonstrating that viewers tend to imitate aggressive actions, especially when models are not punished. When they see whoever is doing aggression and they are not punished, then it will have much more impact on children, particularly when they see such kind of violence in the media. Observers who see models being rewarded for aggressive behaviors are likely to be repeated those behaviors, while those who see models being punished tend not to repeat them. However, even when models are punished, observer can still learn the disapproved behavior and might repeat them when incentive comes in the future. Obviously, if they see a certain action is rewarded, then they are more likely to do as compared to when it is punished. But even when it is punished, they learn those behavior, and when incentive comes, they can show those behaviors. So, that it has a lot of implication in terms of how much impact it can have. A study found that more than 5,000 hours of television programming, violence went unpunished 73% of the time. So, lot of program actually shows where violence is glorified and they are not punished. So, obviously, people will learn that something good about it, and when something is rewarded, they will try to repeat those actions. Further research revealed that young observers imitate a model rewarded for aggression, even though they report disliking the model. Even though they dislike something, but when the model is rewarded for aggression, they are more likely to do those actions. This suggests that while they understood aggression was wrong, they still find it exciting. Mentally, everybody understand this is something wrong, but still people feel like doing it because it excites them. This mirrors many television programs where the bad guy is rewarded throughout, but punished only at the end, potentially leading viewers to admire the character despite his wrongdoing. So, there are many characters who are actually negative in so many films. They are highly glorified, and people kind of appreciate the villain more than the hero and so on. So, that is also the way it is kind of depicted in so many programs. So, that can also have a lot of impact on minds, particularly children and so on. Research since 1960s and 70s overwhelmingly support that Bandura's contention that exposure to media violence increases aggression. Studies shows that repeated exposure to media violence during childhood correlates with higher aggression in the young adults. So, those who are exposed to this media violence during the childhood, their aggression are more likely to be correlated positively in their young and adulthood. In late 70s, introduction of violent video games also has been linked to youth aggression. Critics note that shooters in many school killings where children just went to schools and killed so many other children. This happened many times in the USA. Such as those many school situations, most of them were playing lot of violent video games. Most of these perpetrators who kind of just mass shooting in the public, it has been found that lot of them actually, this was in 70s, and in recent scenario also so many such incidents happened, that they also played very violent video games. Although the connection is suggestive, it is not necessarily causal. Rather than concluding, experimental evidence since the mid 80s indicate that violent video games may indeed increase aggression. So, at least it has increases the potential to do that, even if everybody does not get engaged in it. So, this leads to Bandura's, what is the goal of his theory in terms of corrective actions is that developing his social cognitive theory to modify or change behavior which society deems undesirable or abnormal. Similar to Skinner's approach, Bandura also tried to focus on external factors, particularly inappropriate or destructive behaviors operating under the belief that they are learned. So, they can be just like all behaviors they are learned. So, they can be also kind of changed using relearning processes. So, So, in his approach he used three forms of behavior therapy. One is modeling, guided participation and covert modeling, two mostly used as a therapeutic situations. So, basically in modeling is a way of, because most people learn from by modeling. So, one way to change behavior is again kind of using modeling to change the learning. So, that is called as relearning or changing behavior. He applied modeling technique to eliminate fears and other intense emotional reactions, has been used also like one of the classic study was of snake phobia, where people were afraid of snake. Bandura and his associates successfully eliminated intense fear of snake in adults. They subjected the subject watched a film in which individuals of different age groups made progressively closer contact with a snake, starting from handling a plastic snake to eventually letting a larger snake crawl over their bodies. So, by observing that slowly unlearn this fear and they remove the phobia for snake and so on. So, the modeling technique was used to as a therapy. Some technique called guided participation also is used from this perspective, where it involves watching a live model in participating in changing the behavior. For example, in the same example of treating snake phobia, subjects watch throughout observational window as a live model handles a snake. So, in this guided participation, actual model actually comes and handles a snake. Slowly the person also learns that it is nothing to be afraid of it in terms of. So, just to remove the excessive fear and so on. In the covert modeling, basically it is done even in the absence of observational model. So, directly there is no model, subjects are instructed to imagine a model coping with a feared and threatening situation. So, by imagining that certain situation in their mind, that they are able to cope with certain situations, certain structured instructions are given, and like that also sometimes it can work. So, these are mostly based on the observational learning techniques. So, if we evaluate the Bandura's theory, mostly this theory has been very successful in explaining complex behaviors. Some critics argued that this theory neglects essentially mostly some of the inner aspects of behavior such as motivation and emotion, which theory has focused here and there, but may not be focused exclusively here. Many argue that they compared this oversight to a physician treating patients with stomach pains solely addressing their outward expression of discomfort rather than diagnosis the underlying causes. So, many argues that he is not focusing on the underlying causes, but mostly on the expressed phenomena. So, that is some people argue about this theory. Otherwise, his theory has been very successful and lot of empirical support, and was able to use scientific laboratory techniques objectively lend itself well to a laboratory investigation, aligning on the experimental psychology tradition. It has an empirical support and so on. So, this theory by and large has a lot of applications, lot of empirical support and lot of applications also. These are some of the major ideas of Bandura's theory of social learning or social cognitive theory. With this I stop here. Thank you.